What's going on, guys? Welcome to Abyss Gazing, a horror podcast where we celebrate all things spooky and mental health. My name is Josh, and I'm one of the co-hosts here, and bringing you a live coverage that we did from this past year's Creature Feature Weekend. If you guys have never been, it's a great convention that takes place in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, once a year, where it brings together just the coolest names in film, literature, comics, etc. And you guys are going to get to meet some of those guys on this episode. We're sitting down with some independent authors and the dudes at the Mahoning-Drive-in, some independent filmmakers, and also legendary actors like Jim-Krut and danny-llyod. And we also got to sit down with the chiodo-brothers, the visionary minds behind Killer-Klowns-from-outer-space. Really hope you guys enjoy this episode. Now, we will have video versions of these interviews up on the YouTube run by our parent company, Victims and Villains, so make sure that you guys go subscribe over there. So that way you guys get to see these beautiful faces when these videos go up. They're still being edited by our wonderful editor, Alan Cram. I hope you guys will enjoy this episode nonetheless. Be sure that you guys hit that subscribe button because we're going to be back next week talking about the Benson Moorhead film Spring with a brand new fill-in co-host, Nugs, the final girl. So until next time, make sure that you guys follow our parent company, Victims and Villains. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, and of course YouTube, as I've already mentioned. And you guys can find Abyss Gazing wherever you guys get your podcasts from. So until next time, remember that the longer you gaze into the abyss, the more the abyss gazes back into you. We hope you guys enjoy these interviews. I'm here with Dennis. He is the writer on the independent comic book Lycan. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing just peachy. How about yourself?
I'm well. So you have hello, friend. You have quite a few issues out so far, which I always think is really impressive because I follow the independent comic scene, and I always know how long it takes issues to come out. So how many issues do you have here?
So I have two. So I've got my first issue, and they're all the same book, just different covers. So we have soft cover, hard cover, and then issue 2 just came out this week. And so again, soft covers and hard covers with variants and things like that. And third issue's in production, should be out next year. And then the plan is 15 books in the series, so it'll take a little bit, but
this is an investment of time that you have to do.
Yep, it is definitely an investment of time.
Well, tell me a little bit about the book.
Sure. So, Lycan Solomon's Odyssey is the story of the world's first werewolf. And so the first book starts out in 8000 BC, and each of the books moves a little bit forward through time and looks at different regional mythologies, folklores, monsters, stuff like that.
Now, is it always going to be the same central figure as we're traveling throughout the ages?
Yes, so that's Solomon. Solomon is the sort of the main figure that we follow through the story. And then each of the books has different side characters as the settings and time periods change.
So I always find it really interesting when there is like a saga to the book. I always imagine that it's got to be like a lot of more like research. Can you kind of talk about the BTS of like how you like find and craft each story?
So with this story, it's a little difficult, especially when you're going back to like 8000 BC, because there's not that much information because it's pre-written history. But then as I move through the book series, the third book is Gilgamesh and H.P. Lovecraft, that sort of thing. You got a lot more to work with. But it's, you're looking at mythologies, monsters, history, religion, all kinds of different things. So yeah, it usually takes weeks and weeks of research, and then when you're writing it, making sure, okay, when I write it, I didn't step on anything, did I? Did I mess anything up with the, and then when you're going through the art, does this clothing match the period, or does this, building design match the period? Because some people will get on you about that. So no, it's definitely a ton of research to go that route.
So I've dabbled in writing comics, and part of my dabbling included a maxi series. Similar to yours, never came to fruition, though. As stuff in the independent realms sometimes happen.
I never knew how my story was going to end, and it was going to be 12 issues. Do you have like a trajectory and like an understanding of how the story will end?
I know what happens on the very last page of the very last book. I know what happens in every single book, yeah. I have the whole 15 series planned out.
That's crazy.
Yep.
Like, I'll be here for it, man. What I'm always kind of curious, like, what was it about, particularly about like this spanning decades and centuries, and like what made you kind of like want to pursue like a historical twist to the story?
Well, there was a couple things. I've always been interested in the idea of werewolves since I was a little kid, sort of the duality. That's why I've always liked Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, the Incredible Hulk, characters like that. But then specifically with the mythology, when I was in high school and college, I started playing God of War and then got really into Greek mythology. And then through my podcast, we started going into other types of mythology, and I discovered how crazy like regional mythologies can get. So then I was like, well, I'm making this comic book about this werewolf. I would really like it if this character can like interact with all these different time periods and stuff. So I'm like, well, let's just go all the way back to the beginning, and now he can hop through and look at these different sort of interactions and regions and time periods and be part of these world events and stuff like that. So that's kind of where it came from and sort of evolved to, I would say.
All right, well, you mentioned the podcast, so let's bring it up. Let's go ahead and plug it. Tell us what it is about, where people can find it.
So the podcast is called Botched, a D&D podcast. It is a Dungeons & Dragons podcast. It's an improv comedy show draped in the loose skin of Dungeons & Dragons with a little bit of drinking involved. And so, we've been doing that for 7 years now. We do a live show at Dragon Con every year in front of about 300 very drunk people. We're usually helping that. We usually give out free booze at the cons. But, for instance, last year we had a guy in a cow outfit on stage with us, and he would drink beer by shoving it up into the head of the cow so he could chug the beers. And it had teeth. It was very distracting. But he also had udders that had White Russian shots in them. So if you needed to heal, you had to drink the White Russian out of his udder. So our show gets a little crazy, but you can find Botched the D&D podcast on all your podcatchers, literally anything, Spotify, iTunes, anything you listen to. And you can also find us on botchpodcast.com or patreon.com/botchpodcast.
All right, go support that podcast, because we here at Victims and Villains love supporting independent arts. I feel like I am just like constantly like this guy's just like having a ball with me. So let's go back to the character of Solomon. One of the things that I guess like I've never considered, probably it's a few years ago, is being that you have a character that spans multiple decades, has people that he loves, people that he adores, people that he gets close to, literally live and die in every timeline. Can you kind of explore the mental health of how that has impacted him as a character?
Yeah. So the second book specifically goes into a lot of PTSD, because it takes place right after the first book ends, and I'm not going to spoil the first book ends, but it's a werewolf story, so typically not happy. And so it deals with trauma. In the second book, he sort of isolates himself, which, as human beings, it's not a good idea to isolate anyways, because it's bad for our mental health. And so it just sort of compounds on him. And so we get into hallucinations, voices, things that he thinks are hallucinations but are actually there, and then messing with him in terms of mythological creatures. So each book sort of goes into a little bit of that sort of mental breakdown and worry about, like, okay, when I wake up and there's like blood all over him, oh no, was it a person, was it an animal, that sort of thing. So each of the books is definitely going to look at sort of the inner turmoil of, being a monster and not having really any control over what happens when the full moon pops out.
Is it hard for Solomon to like make friends knowing that he'll outlive them?
So in the second book specifically, he's isolating himself, and he's a very social character. When you read the first book, he's very jokey, he's very jovial. I apologize for the Harry. We can bend his arms down.
It's all good.
In the first book, he's very jokey, he's very jovial, but then obviously he's definitely a different tone in the second book, and he desperately wants to be social, wants to have friends, but he's also worried that he'll hurt people. But by the end of the second book, he meets somebody, and he starts to sort of dip his toe back into that social pond. And then each book sort of the same thing, where he'll guard himself a little bit against certain loss, because again, even if something doesn't get killed by him or by another monster, they're just going to die from old age at some point. So it's one of those things where it's never going to be easy for him. It's just one of those things he has to live with and sort of figure out how to keep on keeping on.
I feel like that's like the mental health struggle of us all, is understanding how to keep on, because there are sometimes that we will outlive our loved ones, and that's a very hard reality to do. But part of the journey is healing and learning how to befriend other people and do relationships and communities with them. So I have two more questions for you. My question, second to last question is going to be, what is your favorite werewolf movie?
So this is going to be controversial because everyone tells me this werewolf movie is terrible. I love Dog Soldiers. That's my favorite werewolf movie. There's a lot of it's got the Onion Knight in it from Game of Thrones, for God's sake. I mean, there's a lot of good actors. It's a nice self-contained story, and I dig the design of the werewolves. I just like that movie a lot. I know everyone says American Werewolf in London, and that's a good movie too. But for whatever reason, I've always just enjoyed that sort of camaraderie and trying to get out of this dangerous situation of Dog Soldiers.
That's my cousin Rick's favorite one, so you're not alone.
Okay, there we go.
And it just got a 4K upgrade. So I don't know if you knew that, but that's a thing.
I'm going to have to get that, because I did not know that.
I'm going to go with the Howling for mine.
Howling,
so I feel like you can't beat D.
I
Wallace.
was going to say, those are usually the two people go with. It's American Werewolf in London or The Howling is usually the ones I hear. Or maybe the original Lon Chaney Wolfman sort of thing. That's another one too.
Lon Chaney, man.
That was what got me into werewolves in the first place. There was a library book. It was a picture book of the original Lon Chaney, and I was like, "What is this?" And I didn't even read it. I was just looking at the pictures, and I was just fascinated. And yeah, that's how I got into werewolves in the first place, was Lon Chaney.
Gateway stuff, man. It always starts in books for some reason. All right, my last question is, if people do not have the chance and the opportunity to be here at Creature Feature this weekend, where can people find the book online?
So you can get it online at hiveheadstudios.com. Hive as in like a beehive. Hiveheadstudios.com. It's there digitally. It's there physically. If you want to check out the book, the first 18 pages digitally are online for free. So you could just look at the first 18 pages and be like, this seems like something I'd want to check out. And then you can either get it digitally or buy it physically, and I'll ship it to you within a day or two.
So now you have no reason not to check it out. The links are in the descriptions below. His name is Matt Plazzi, and he is the author behind 8 Days in the Woods. What's going on?
Not much. How you guys doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fun. I love coming to Creature Feature. It's a local show. Craig puts on a great show. There's lots of people here, friends. It reminds me of conventions before they got super big. And I just love the vibe. We can sit here and we can do this, and we can talk to people without shouting. And great vendors, great guests. I love this type of show.
Yeah, like I was telling Jim-krut before, this show is one of my favorite shows to do. And it's for the exact reasons that you just mentioned. It definitely feels like it's just very communal based, and I absolutely love that.
Yeah, I mean, and Craig gets a lot of people that don't get into some of the bigger shows, so you don't get to see a lot of these guests all the time. And then he brings in people like Doug Jones, and there's always someone here I've never met before that I've been absolutely dying to, and it makes me love it even more.
Yeah. Well, let's jump into your book, 8 Days in the Woods, which, well, you give me the elevator pitch.
Okay. When the Blair-Witch-Project came out in 1999, I was instantly a fan. I didn't believe it was real. I was just enamored by... I'd never seen a movie like that before. And I saw it in the theater, and I was like, I got to go see this again. And I was just... I was on the internet every day at that point. We were still dialing up to AOL in those days. Chat rooms, instant messenger. And the internet, it was the Wild West. There wasn't a lot going on. You didn't have a lot of information. So I would pick up pieces of information. I'm like, oh, that's really neat. And I've been a fan ever since, and it was many years later that I finally made it to Burkittsville. Now, in 2000, I actually went to the house when it was still standing. But I never made it to Burkittsville or the other filming locations. So I went and I did a tour for the day, and I was like, I'm going to go to all the filming locations and finally experience the Blair Witch. And I started thinking about it, and I was talking to another guy, and he goes, it'd be fun if we went and camped somewhere out there and did this. So we coordinated it, and he ended up not being able to come, but I was going anyway. And I had gotten to know Ed Sanchez a little bit and invited him out. And Ed was like, sure, and he started talking about it on a podcast or two, and he's like, where are you going to be? I was like, I'm going to be at Burkittsville at 9 a.m. 3 people showed up that I'd never met that wanted me to go take them into the woods. So I took them on a tour of all the filming locations, and there's a campsite right outside Ellicott City, Patapsco State Park. And it's got running water and electricity, so we weren't roughing it, but we camped out. We called Mike from the movie and had a chat with him at the fire, and we went to the house the next day, and then I went home and I was like, the Blair Witch doesn't have a Facebook presence, so I made a Facebook group. And Ed jumped in and started inviting cast and crew members of the movie. And they were super interactive with fans, so more and more people started coming, and I would post pictures of the event that I ran. And someone said, are you going to do it again? I said, well, I guess if you want me to. So that's how the Blair Witch Experience was born. So every year I run a tour of all the filming locations for the Blair Witch, where we camp out, and then we go to the house the next day. And actors, Ed Sanchez, come out, meet with fans, recreate scenes. And about 2 or 3 years into that, I had asked Ed, I said, well, the film's turning 15. Is Lionsgate going to do anything for it? And he said, no. And without missing a beat, I said, well, what if I wrote a book about your story? And he goes, yeah, go ahead and do it. Well, little did I know that he was serious about me doing it, because he asked me about it, and I was like, well, I said, Ed, I don't know most of these people. I don't know what I don't know. So he got me in touch with 1 or 2 people, and I started unraveling how much went into making the movie we saw in theaters. They filmed it over 8 days in continuity. There was no set dressing, no script. I mean, it was all guerrilla filmmaking. And I first started thinking, this is going to be a very big book. There's not going to be much to it. I spent the next 4.5 years researching. I discovered things about the movie that I had never known, uncovered things that the creators had kind of forgotten about, and I ended up finally being able to locate the mom and the little girl from the movie because they weren't credited in the movie correctly. So finding them and being able to interview them and get their story was one of the most rewarding things in the world. And over those 4 years, I think I interviewed about 40 people, because I didn't realize how deep that rabbit hole went. And what I thought was going to be a very short book turned into be a 300-plus page historical document about how these guys went into the woods with the idea of, let's make a movie, give the camera to the crew, and see what we got.
Wow. That is an intense journey to have. What would you say is like probably your favorite portion of that particular, like the research and writing and kind of just like the experience of having that?
Really hearing the stories that were being recalled for the first time in over 20 years, and connecting people that had been involved with the movie at different phases to each other that had never known each other or talked to each other. So, but the mom, Susie, and her daughter Ingrid, that was their real names in the movie. They were not a planted actresses. They were just stopped. And Susie felt bad because Heather wasn't getting a lot of interviews, so she made up that entire scene on the spot. She didn't know it was for a movie coming to theater. She thought it was a student film being made for a college class. And she started getting phone calls that, you're in this movie. So her story and Ingrid's story about growing up as the Blair Witch baby was one of my favorite things, because they had never been contacted by the filmmakers because they didn't have their right information. And Now they are two of the biggest supporters of the film and the group and everything that we do with the Blair Witch. All because it took me about 3 or 4 months to track them down. And I can't even take credit for that. Someone who knew them asked Ed if he had talked to them, and he knew them. And Ed called me and said, "Hey, we found them." And I would have felt the book was incomplete if I had not gotten their story.
That's awesome. That's absolutely awesome. There's nothing like a reward like that satisfying.
I still pinch myself sometimes because Susie or Ingrid will text me if someone asks them a question about the Blair Witch that they don't know, or they say someone's looking for this, and they'll put them in contact with me, because I want all Blair Witch fans to have a great experience of whether they want to go visit the woods or go to Burkittsville, and just to have that kind of contact to put people in connections with each other or facilitate a screening of the movie or an event, something like that I love doing, because I felt the Blair Witch wasn't getting a lot of love from 2000 to like 2013, 14, and now it seems to be more and more back into the conversations, not just with found footage, but just with the fact that we're approaching the 25th anniversary. And it's hard to think that film was filmed in 97, came out in 99, and now we're talking about its 25th anniversary next year.
I mean, as far as a film goes, like, I mean, it is like an absolute like game changer, because I mean, at that point in horror, just to kind of give you guys a landscape, if you guys don't know, is like found footage was something that like really wasn't done in the mainstream. I mean, like, you had like McPherson tapes was kind of like the golden standard at that time, but the Blair Witch Project completely changed everything in found footage.
Yeah, I think it had a lot to do, hand in hand, one, with the film itself. The film, I don't believe, was a stroke of luck. It was very methodical, and that's what I learned about when I was writing the book, is how much went into it, because I didn't think it was that much. But then how Ed and the Haxon guys and Dan and Greg Hale and all these guys, from the beginning, marketed it as, we're just going to put this out there. We're not going to tell people if it's real or not. So the marketing campaign that we saw as fans was just a continuation of what they had been doing. They were putting up little clips on their website, on their message board. They were sending out newsletters, but they were keeping that veil of reality versus fiction very, very gray, very muddied. And from the time it appeared on John Pearson's split screen in August of 97 as it was like a pitch tape that they showed, people were flooding to the message board on John Pearson's website, actually crashing it because people thought, what is this? We need to know more. And that gave them the idea of doing that kind of marketing to get people talking about it. And then after they sold the film, Artisan just continued it and just turned the volume up and got it out to everybody.
Now, all right, so I got to ask this as a fan of the franchise. Obviously, the sore spot for all Blair Witch projects is Book of Shadows.
Yep.
What are your personal opinion on Book of Shadows?
What's this rated?
PG.
Oh no, this is R, man. You can do whatever you want.
The movie itself fucking sucks. Now, I'm going to go on record. I have no problem with Joe Berlinger or the cast. I thought they did a great job. The problem was the studio. The studio wanted to make that movie. Ed and Dan were like, "We'll do it. Let us do it. We could do a prequel. We can do something." Studio said no. They wanted to do it their own way. So they basically meddled with a film that really, in my opinion, shouldn't have been made when it was made. It was too soon. They should have let it breathe for a year or two. Let Ed and Dan come back and play in that world. And you said franchise. I've never felt that Blair Witch lent itself to becoming a franchise. Now, it can if you change some certain things. One, next Blair Witch film should not be found footage. It lives well in different media. You can do a good video game. You can do a limited series on Netflix, something like that. But it doesn't have to be found footage, but you can play in that world. It effectively took away all the momentum that Blair Witch had when that movie came out and stopped it, because we didn't get anything Blair Witch from 2000 to 2016. I mean, we got a glimmer here or there that something might be happening, but we didn't get memorabilia. spin-offs. There was really nothing for 15 years. Book of Shadows, because Artisan was like, well, it didn't do anything. I guess we'll just shelve it.
Biggest mistake, man. I mean, we've gotten the Blair Witch 2016 movie. We got the video game. But it does seem like that world definitely has, like, so much more to offer because, like, we essentially got this, like, experimental film. But the lore behind that experimental film is so deep.
The world, I mean, they built a world for this movie to live in. And a lot of films don't really do that. Like, you hear exposition in movies about certain things or events. They went and built this world and created an entire lore and backstory, like you said. And they didn't need to. They could have just done something small to kind of give you some backstory. And I think that's why something like Curse of the Blair Witch works well. Because to me, it works well. You can watch it before the movie or you can watch it after the movie. Because it can lead you in if you want to know about it, and then you go watch the film, or you go watch the film and be like, what did I watch? And then you get all this, like, great information and just the way it was done. And I've always felt they touched on all the high points of the Blair Witch mythology, where there might be other little pockets of stories or events that maybe we don't know about that they didn't touch on because maybe it wasn't the big one. So if you go and play in that world, you can come up with, well, yeah, Rustin Parr in 41 did, or, you know, in the 40s did this, but did you hear about what happened in the 60s? Not a lot of people talk about that one. You could shoehorn that in, and it would be seamless. That's what I've always felt that you could do if you wanted to expand on that first film.
There's still opportunity, like, even, like, almost 25 years later. Like, next year's the 25th anniversary. But I want to talk about, like, the process of, like, researching, like, the book from, like, concept to, like, final, you know, getting the final edit, getting the book all put together. Like, that's almost a 5-year process. Like, that creative process has to have some sort of effect on your mental health. Can you kind of talk about how that process affected you?
Yeah. When I first started it, like I said, I didn't think there was going to be a lot, so I would call Ed and say, okay, well, I wanted to do it in order, because I didn't want to jump around because I didn't want to miss something. So I called Ed, and we sat down for a first interview, and he started telling me stuff, and he said, well, you should talk to so-and-so about that. So I'd write that down, I'd write that person down, and then I would go down the Google rabbit hole every night. I would just start Googling, and I would find a name or an event from an old article and then research that. So that led me to this person or this event. And I would call or text Ed and be like, what about this? He goes, oh, man, talk to Manello about that. So I would just start creating this list. I think the best way to summarize what this process was like is it's a 5,000-piece puzzle laid out in front of you, and every piece is turned upside down. So I would turn one piece over, and I would turn this over. And it didn't match. So I'd turn it. So I started building this web of information, and I would get a couple of documents up front. They'd be like, oh, yeah, well, I have this old set of emails or newsletters. One thing I didn't know until about a year and a half into it was that they videotaped their behind-the-scenes process. So they would have a camera running during auditions and meetings. Like, they would go deep dive. They would video record an hour-long meeting, and they saved them. And they had them all on high 8 tape. So I drove to who had them in New Jersey. I had a tote. And I had to go home. I had to digitize them. I actually ended up buying the same model of camera that Heather used and converted it through my computer to a digital file. And I sat down and probably watched over 130 hours of whatever they filmed, which was during filming, post-production, pre-production, regular meetings, Sundance stuff, and I would sit and watch it in real time, and I would just be taking notes. And I had to watch all of that. And then I would start building out, okay, if I'm talking about editing, okay, so-and-so we're going to talk about this. And I would interview all the Haxon guys pretty much with the same questions, because I knew if I had to ask an important question, I wanted to get that answer from 5 different people to make sure it matched. It's a nonfiction book, so I can't make it up. I can't distort facts. And I said to everybody, this isn't a tabloid piece. This isn't a tell-all. I don't care about the argument you had unless it was a constructive argument about editing or story. I don't care. And there wasn't a lot of drama, which was nice. These guys are wonderful. The salt of the earth people. I cannot love them any more than I can possibly. And once they realized, as they got to know me, what I was trying to do, they would start reaching out to me. They were like, you asked me about something and I forgot about it. He goes, but I do remember that. So I would mark that down for the next time we'd interview. And every interview would lead into a path that I didn't realize we were going, because they would start talking about this person who was involved, or this event that they went to, or this screening. By the time I was done, I had a tote full of notes and interviews and documents. I found out that they were keeping a journal during production that had dates, names, places that they had forgot they had written down. I got that late in the game, which helped me basically flesh out and finish the book, because now I had a complete timeline. I built a timeline of dates and events to know where I was at, because I cover every aspect that I could, because I felt it was important that people understand that it wasn't just sending 3 kids out in the woods with a camera, how much work went into it. Because I felt I wanted to tell their story, I wanted to celebrate them, because they deserved it, because no one had ever done a deep dive. The articles all say the same thing, they all ask the same questions. So I learned to read between the lines of old interviews about stuff that I wanted to dive deeper on. And I would find the best research was the old interviews from the online from 99 and 2000, when it was all fresh. Completely different interviews than what we get now. So I would drum up and they'd be like, how do you know that? And I was like, well, I read an article that, so-and-so wrote, or I talked to so-and-so about that. And they're like, they were like, I totally forgot about that. Or they're like, I don't even remember that. And I would have to go through the footage and the other interviews. And I was like, yeah, but you sat down and you were talking. They would go, oh yeah, now I remember. And they would just give me this wealth of information that I never knew I was going to get, and they had totally forgotten about. So it was a great rediscovery experience for them, because now they got to relive all this, and it started to just churn up more and more memories. And I felt at one point the book was never going to get done, because I just kept getting more and more information. And I think I'd finally gotten to the point where I was like, I think I'm done interviewing. And I finally got to sit down, and I was kind of writing it a little bit as I was going along to get my thoughts out. But I sat down in August of 2018, and I basically wrote until March of 2019. And I would come home and I finally had everything ready to go, and I would highlight, and I would write for 2-3 hours a night just to finally get it out and see what I had.
All right. Well, I feel like we've teased this a lot. So where can people find the book online?
You can find it on Amazon. It's directly on Amazon. I always have a few copies with me. I'll be at AuthorCon at the end of March, I guess beginning of April, down in Williamsburg, Virginia. The website for the event is blairwitchexperience.com. Same thing with Instagram. The Facebook group online is me and the entire cast and crew are there, so I'm always there hanging out, and people are sharing artwork and theories and just celebrating the movie. So you can find the book, you can find me online, and like I said, I usually have copies available. If anyone ever wants them autographed, I can do that for them as well.
All right. Well, I thank you for your time. If you guys are fans of The Blair Witch, make sure that you guys check out his book, because, like we said during this entire interview, it was a game changer for the found footage genre, and this is the deepest dive that you will find. So check it out wherever you guys, Amazon. Go check it out. Links are in the bio.
If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find
resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below, wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us. What's going on, guys? We're back here at Creature Feature, and if you guys are new to Victims and Villains, we love to support independent film. We run our own film festival if it's not proof enough for you guys, and I'm here right now with Ken-Arnold. He is the producer behind A Comedy of Horrors Volume 1 and The Night-Watchmen. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. This has been a really fun experience so far.
Well, welcome, sir. So let's jump right in. Tell us a little bit about these movies.
Well, we got the Comedy of Horrors, which is a horror comedy anthology, so there's 5 different films in it. So I like to say it's the dumbest thing we've ever done. But, again, it's horror comedy, right? So it has Matt Servito in it, who's from The Sopranos. It's got Henry Zabrowski, who does Your Pretty Face is Going to Hell on Cartoon Network, on Adult Swim. So he's in it. Last Podcast on the Left. We have an actor out of New York, Kathy Searle, who's hilarious. She was just in NCIS, Hawaii, I think it is now, or whatever one they're doing. I don't know. There's so many of them. But we produced that. We shot it in Annapolis, Maryland. One segment we shot down in Atlanta. That was Henry's because that's where he's based. So we went down there to shoot that one. But it's been to a few film festivals. We kind of got held up with it because of COVID, right? Because we shot right before everything shut down. And then there were no film festivals to really enter. Because you want to go to a film festival, right? As an audience member, you want to go. You want to see these films. You want to see them in a theater with other people and laugh, and But we didn't have that with this film. But it's out now. You can stream it. You can stream it on Amazon, Tubi, if it's part of your subscription.
So I always say that horror comedy is like one of the hardest genres to like absolutely like master, because it has to balance that just right to where it doesn't feel too heavy-handed to the horror, too heavy-handed with the comedy. What was like the challenge and the inspiration for like pursuing one of the harder genres?
Horror comedy is very hard because what people like here in the U.S. doesn't translate in Germany, doesn't translate in France, doesn't translate in Japan. But fortunately for us, we were able to do that with Night Watchmen. We were able to balance that. That line, and we were able to sell that film all around the world. And because we had enough of the horror element in it to go along with the physical comedy, there's more physical comedy in The Night Watchmen, which I think sells worldwide. The jokes, the words, sometimes they don't translate. In German, a joke might not translate at all. You're just like, we've had friends who were German who watched it and were just like, they didn't laugh at jokes. We were just like, oh, well, I don't know how to explain it, to you because it doesn't translate. But worldwide, I think it's more about the fear, right? And then the physical comedy. And we were able to be successful with The Night Watch because we have a lot of both in that film. Now, this one's a little bit more, there's not as much physical comedy. There's more jokes. So, we'll see how it does because this one just came out. We'll see how it does worldwide. So, yeah.
So let's talk about The Night Watchmen real quick. Kind of give us a brief synopsis of what this movie's about.
All right, The Night Watchmen. You got 3 inept night watchmen who get a delivery that's not supposed to come to their warehouse, and they take it and hold it for a night. And inside that delivery is something that they have to survive the night with a group of other people. So they're trapped inside this warehouse with something that came in a coffin that they have to survive the night.
So it's that's the synopsis, and they're inept. So and I'm one of them. So.
I'm curious. Like I love the fact that like you're bringing so much light to like horror comedy, because I guess like we've been saying, it is hard to kind of like translate that well for many different audiences. And you said that with this one, so like can you kind of talk about the process of like finding what jokes really worked, what didn't?
What we did was we had great writers, right? I came up with the story. I didn't write the actual script. That was my partner, my business partner, Dan DeLuca. He wrote the original script, and then we had a guy by the name of Jamie Nash come in, and he's a great comedic writer. And he came in and he added some jokes, he polished some jokes up, and because of that collaboration, we were able to work a lot of jokes. And the one good thing is the director on set allowed us to improvise a lot. Not only physically and with lines, it was amazing that he allowed us to do that, because in that moment, with good chemistry amongst actors, like all these guys, Kevin Jiggets, right, Dan DeLuca, and myself, we've known each other for 20 years, and we've done 1,000 projects together. But this was the first feature film we got to work on together, which, and the chemistry between us was, and people talk about it all the time, the chemistry was so good. It's because we knew each other, and we knew how each other would react, and we knew the jokes that would work amongst ourselves, which translated to the screen, which was great. So that was part of what made it come together, because we knew each other so well.
Yeah, like chemistry, I feel like sometimes as like viewers, like we underplay like the importance of chemistry. And we're a publication that deals with, pop culture, independent cinema, but also with mental health. Mm-hmm. And so like the mental health of like a good like on-screen collaboration and like friendships is really important to characters. And how long would you say is like in terms of like being friends with these guys, like how long has that like something like this like been in the works for you guys, like where it's like we've worked on like all of these projects, let's do a feature?
We started working on projects. You remember Project Greenlight? Years ago? Yes, I do. Right, like 2005-ish, right? Well, we started doing stuff then. We did a Project Greenlight thing, and we made it to like the top 25. We just didn't make it into the actual show, but we were very fortunate with how far we got with that. But we started working from there. About 2008, we came up with this idea. 2008, and then it took us almost 7 years to get the financing to actually shoot it. And we're still, we're all still doing our thing. He was in The Wire. He was in The Wire for a whole season. I was on The Wire. We were just doing our acting thing, trying to figure out how to get this all to come together. Dan was also in The Wire, and he joined us. He's one of the guys in the film as well. Unfortunately, he doesn't make it.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. He doesn't make it. But, we've been doing this for so long, and we finally were just like, let's make a feature, man. And we went out, and the hardest part, obviously, in independent film, raising the money. Always raising the money. And we finally were able to raise the money to do it. And man, it was full steam ahead. Let's go. Let's do this. And things just fell into place. We got this incredible location in Annapolis, Maryland that just fell into our laps, this warehouse. The script originally wasn't the warehouse, but because we got it, we changed it. We changed it to adapt it to fit the location. And it went better than we thought. The clowns, originally in the script, were in it for just 5 minutes. Now the clowns are throughout the whole thing. And the clown became the main villain of the script, which the original script, clown was in it, 5 minutes, gone. And then it was vampires, but, spoiler alert again, vampires. But, the movie's been out for 6 years now. Yeah, it's been out. It came out in 2017, but the original idea started in 2008, and here we are in 2023, and still going strong. It did really well worldwide, which was amazing. And we were in theaters in Malaysia, so I can't even get off a plane in Malaysia. I get off the plane, I get swarmed like the Beatles. No, I'm kidding.
Well, that's the awesome thing about like something like independent cinema is that like it has a life of its own. So like you're constantly being like having that discovery, and now with platforms like Tubi, Plex, Amazon, like you guys have that ability to be discovered all over again.
Yeah, and a lot of people are trying to start their own like Netflix channels now. You see that a lot, genre stuff, and so there's even going to be more of that coming up. But then again, if there's too many, then they'll all start consolidating back down again. You'll see that happen as well. But there's so much opportunity right now for independent filmmakers, because you can make a movie. You can make a movie with your phone. Yeah. Like, you've seen it. Absolutely. Yep. Already. You can make a movie with your phone that can get mass distribution. So, yeah, it's going to be a good moving forward for independent filmmakers. But, you got to be careful too. Distribution is, you don't want to give your film away. I will say that you got to be careful with distribution. So.
I'm well aware of that.
Yes,
so I've worked with studios a lot as a journalist. So like I understand about that kind of stuff.
And that's a whole nother conversation. Yeah. It really is. We could talk all day about that.
All right, so I got to ask. This is my last question. This says Volume 1. What's in the future for installments of A Comedy of Horrors?
We've already come up with another idea. And it all comes down to what? Financing, right? So we'll see how this does, within the next 6 months to a year. If it does well and it starts making money for us, then absolutely we'll do a volume 2. We want to. We just want to keep cranking them out. Our next thing is a horror western, actually, a town called Purgatory. We shot that in Austria in 2021. And we're just wrapping up post-production now. A lot of special effects, kind of delayed it. Again, COVID was a pain in the butt, trying to get it finished. But, it's almost done, and we'll be releasing this later in the year.
All right. Well, my last question is, where can people follow you guys online?
You can follow us. You can follow me, Ken-Arnold Actor. And then you can go to my website. It lists all of the projects that we've done, Comedy of Horrors, the-Night-Watchmen. The other my IMDb page, so you can check out all the other stuff that I've done. So yeah, you can follow us there. Cool. Yeah.
All right, well, you guys can follow the links in the descriptions below. Make sure that you guys check out A Comedy of Horrors Volume 1 and The Night Watchmen, wherever you guys stream your movies or wherever they are currently streaming. But you guys can also go to justwatch.com, enter in the titles, and check them out. If you guys watch Joe Bob Briggs, then chances are you guys know the name the-Mahoning-Drive-in, and I'm here with Virgil, one of the gentlemen who help keep the drive-in alive.
That's right. It's good to be here. Welcome.
So what is it about the Mahoning-Drive-in in particular that has given it like the longevity, given it like an iconic name now?
The legendary status.
Yes.
So the Mahoning-Drive-in Theater not only is the only 100% 35 millimeter drive-in left in the country, I would say our programming's pretty unmatched when it comes to drive-in fare. We do nothing but classics, stone cold classics. And to be able to see them on 35 millimeter film it's once in a lifetime for a lot of people.
Absolutely. So you guys are the subject of a film we actually covered a few years ago called At the Drive-In, and it's a great documentary. Yeah. I highly recommend it. If you guys haven't checked it out, please do. But what was it like to kind of like have that entire journey of like kind of like being on the verge of death and then kind of like filming the resurrection process?
Totally. Well, ironically, we didn't realize that we were, at this real turning point in the business. We were in it all heart to save the place. We were happy working for free. We were happy reviving the theater. And what the documentary did for us was gave us a voice and took it across the country. So now we have a podcast. We're standing as the kind of beacons of the drive-in culture throughout the country. It gave us a voice to speak on what's important about preserving not only 35 millimeter, but the drive-in culture. So, and for anybody who comes to the drive-in, they see it right away. It's something that should be preserved.
So for someone that might not be like us, that might not be cinephiles and might not understand the importance of 35 millimeter, can you explain why it has still a significance in 2023?
Absolutely. So if you grew up pre-2014 watching 35 millimeter, that is our cinematic experience, our cinematic formula. So we really feel that the magic of movie going lies in the film. The true magic of 24 frames per second tricking your brain. But not only that, there is a aesthetic to it as well. I'm sure you've heard vinyl people say there's nothing like listening to vinyl. Has that certain sound. Same thing with film. There's a lived-in feel that almost you can't replicate with digital. So it is something that I think people convert to. They start to love it for the right reasons.
Yeah, well, I feel like once you've kind of experienced 35 millimeter, it's like there's no going back kind of thing.
Oh yeah, without a doubt, it is. It's something magical within those reels that you really can't explain to people until they get there. Very much like the drive-in experience.
Yeah, I didn't experience the drive-in experience. I was like already an adult, and it was like, man, like where has this been? Kind of like my whole life.
It's a staple of American culture. At one point, every single town had their neighborhood drive-in, and unfortunately, over time, our booming business has gone down to 300 drive-ins across the country. So you really have to work to go and support them and give them the love. But you know, for us, it's really about keeping the culture alive, viable, and on people's minds. Because people like you who didn't grow up with it, it is something worth rediscovering or discovering. So.
Can you guys talk about how, like, the process of how you guys are keeping that alive? Because obviously you guys have, like, staples like VHS Fest and, like, other glorious events that you can see behind us.
I grew up on a stage performing, singing, acting, and started singing in bands. And the thing that I loved about the band world or the music world, everything's an event. If you go to see an act, it's an event. You have merch to take home. You have all sorts of stuff to remember this moment. And we really took that to heart with the Mahoning when we started and created this punk rock mentality where not only can you come and wear your fandom on your sleeve and sit out under the stars and watch movies, you can take home a t-shirt, you can take home an event poster, you can wear that love ongoing and spread that word. So I think that's something that really stands out for the Mahoning, in that we give people that chance to celebrate the drive-in.
Yeah, film is absolutely like something that deserves to be filmed, and that's the thing that like it feels like is lost in like a modern day cinema is where like every film was like a blockbuster, which
or an event.
Yes, an event. I feel like is more because there are too many blockbusters nowadays, and so.
Your midnight Friday showings, releasings, move to Thursday, then to Wednesday afternoon, then to It's like there is no fandom or fun about the indoor movie experience. And the drive-in inherently allows you to be yourself at the theater and not have to worry about just renting a seat per se and, let you kind of live it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And, I love going to the movies. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I love the experience of being immersed in the theater. But, like, the drive-in is something, like, special and, like, just feels, like, really intimate at the same time.
Absolutely. It's something that, when we first started, there was no game plan for what we were doing. And we've really become an anomaly for the culture in general to say that we're running old movies and people actually come. This day and age when streaming is a thing, but I think there's a power to the drive-in that it's almost unmatched.
There's also an element of community that comes with those that experience as well.
Oh, definitely. Like I said, every town had a drive-in, and the fact that it's one of the last communal experiences that we have together, even more reason to save it.
One of the things that we talk about here all the time is the importance of community. And like the positive impact that it has on your mental health and why you need to have it. And there is something about like not only like movies are like, I feel like for me a great escape for my own mental health, but like also at the same time, like when you get to see a film, whether it's a classic in your guys' case or like something like new and monumental and scary and terrifying or funny, like there's nothing that like beats it than like actually getting to see it with other people who are sharing that experience.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the love of the movie-going experience, to be together in one place, let your emotions go. And it's unfortunate that the indoor situation has been hindered so much by the pandemic, and now it's gotten to a point where, you really are just renting a seat versus paying for an experience.
Yeah, I fully agree. So my last question is going to be, before we talk about social media, is going to be, what do you guys have coming up? What's on the docket?
So we are announcing events pretty much every other day. We show retro classics Tuesday nights, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday nights. Upcoming, we have Wizard of Oz and Willy Wonka in April. We got Terminator versus RoboCop in May. We got Invasion of the Body Snatchers in May. We got a big Muppets event in May. Zombie Fest at the end of May, which is our big kickoff to the season. So there's a lot to love with the Mahoning calendar, sure.
And where can people follow you guys online?
Mahoning-DIT, like drive-in-theater.com, or you can find us at any of the socials, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, any of that jam. Just search Mahoning Drive-in Theater.
Boom. You guys got the information. Click the links in the descriptions below. Virgil, thank you so much.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you.
How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today. And we are here with Jim-Krut, most famously known as the helicopter zombie from Dawn of the Dead. What's going on?
What's going on? We're at Creature Feature here. You're talking to the famous helicopter zombie from the 1978 Dawn of the Dead. You needed to ask me what's going on? Come on.
Look, it's Friday night, man. It's like the kickoff night for the convention. So, I don't know if the night's been good. I don't know if it's been bad.
It's a fun night. Everybody's just having such a great time. You hear about so many wild things in the world that are kind of depressing. You come to a show like Creature Feature Weekend, and you think, man, these people are fun. Look, there's somebody smiling. There's somebody else smiling. Hey, they're laughing over there. It's like people are just having a grand time. I'm getting to meet some guests from other films that I've admired and looked at in the past, but also just a lot of friends in the filmmaking community. A lot of fascinating vendors with really cool toys. Items. Items. Yeah, that's it, items.
No, I think toys is a better word. It's fun, but I love, like, Creature Feature is like the one show that we do every year that I always look forward to, because it's like, no matter what you got going on in here, it's like coming back home to, like, family reunions here.
You run into a lot of friends too.
I do.
Yeah.
Like Alan, who's currently operating our camera right now.
We worked before too. We worked together before too.
So have we.
Yeah, that's right. When you get older, you start to forget. The nice thing is people can tell you that same joke, and you laugh at it again.
So I was a little bit nervous last time we interviewed you. I'm a little bit more confident now in my press skills. So I'm going to ask the question that I feel like you probably get asked a lot. What is it like being operating on such a monumental film for the zombie genre?
It's both a blessing and a blessing, because it was such great good fortune to become the helicopter zombie, working with Tom Savini, who cast me in the role, and I had no idea, neither did anybody else, that this film would take off the way it did. Everybody thought George Romero was really pushing the envelope with Night of the Living Dead, black and white, 1968, and then along comes Dawn of the Dead, 1978, and suddenly everything has been taken up several notches. Not only is it in color, but you've got so many societal themes. You've got the mall, you've got racial issues, you've got male-female relationship issues, power struggles. And people say, hey, this is a great movie. And yet, these are the things that are going on in life. and we don't necessarily step back and look at them the same way that George Romero did. And so that's one of the things that I feel particularly grateful about, being part of a film that takes that kind of a look at society, looks at it in depth, and can, kind of reflect upon itself that way.
I could not have said that any better.
Try it. Go ahead.
I can't. You spoke it so well.
You can do it.
I
know.
Night of the Living Dead is a masterpiece, and Dawn is beats that sequel syndrome really well, and stacks right alongside of Night. And I gotta ask this too. So the film just celebrated a re-release in theaters, 3D, thanks to Regal Cinemas. Did you get a chance to see it?
I saw it with a couple other filmmaker friends from Darkness Waits, and we absolutely loved it. I totally enjoyed what they did with it. A lot of times films made for 3D are kind of scripted out, this is where we're going to have the effects and so forth. With Dawn, you didn't really have a chance to know that, because a lot of people, I think, who saw the 3D version had already seen Dawn, so they had no idea what to expect. So you're kind of, I wouldn't say lulled along, but then bam, here comes the glass or the water or whatever the effect is. It kind of pulls you out, sends you back and forth, and keeps you involved in the film. And I think that's one of the strongest effects of 3D. And it's made me a bigger fan of 3D, seeing how well that was done.
Yeah, I got a chance to see it, and it looked great in 3D. But past Dawn, you have also done a bunch of work in independent film as well. Can you guys talk about the transition of working from something as iconic as Dawn to kind of getting back into the lesser known films?
Yeah, you wait about 30 years, which is when I did Dawn, 1978, and then till about early 2000 something, I just did an audition for an independent film. On the set of Dawn, things were maybe looser than they would on a lot of productions that are just so tightly faceted. But on an independent film, when you're dealing with good fellow actors, things get done. They get done in a looser fashion, perhaps, and they move forward and everybody feels good. They support each other. They build it up. The energy increases. It's like a theatrical production that goes well. You can tell the energy that comes from it when a cast is an ensemble rather than, I got to go get my hamburger now or something. When everybody's focused on the job gets done well. Flip side of that is people who have not worked in film and don't have that same discipline, either in film or discipline in any other form of their lives. So there's I think the call time was 9 o'clock. I think I'll go out and get a coffee now. Wait a minute. No, that's, you have already used the bathroom, washed your hand, gotten into costume, and you're ready to go at 9 o'clock. That's not when you show up and say, I'm going to go out for coffee. So you have to make sure, if you're working in an independent film, where money is generally very tight, budgets are, that you are getting the most out of your people and that you're very selective. It's very easy for a director to say, well, I'm going to pick my friends because it won't cost me anything. Well, it may cost them something if they're really looking to make a good production, if those friends aren't totally passionate about the project, like knowing their lines or just kind of goofing off on set. So you can have both sides of the independent world. The best thing of the independent world is, in terms of film, new ideas, new executions of old ideas, but new storylines, new thoughts. How are they going to do that? I don't know. Let's figure out a way. Hasn't been done before. And those kind of breakthrough moments, I think, are what keeps people coming back to movies. They want to see something they have not seen before.
That's one of the things that I've really loved about independent film, is that, especially doing our platform, is we try to highlight as many independent voices as possible, because you're right, you're constantly coming to that conclusion that we've seen Jason movies X amount of times, and we've seen Michael face off against this and zombies and everything else like that. But when you find something that is gnarly the way that independent films can, and also there's no rules, for independent films, so you can literally do whatever you want?
I read a script for The Only Ones, and I just have a small part in it, and I didn't realize until the end. I said, wait a minute, if I step back, this is like a cabin in the woods. But I have gotten scripts for cabin in the woods films. Maybe people like to shoot cabin in the woods films because they can scream and yell in the woods and nobody's going to, complain or do gunfire, whatever the effects may be. But it's such a beautifully written film, The Only Ones, and just to even have a small part in it, I'm very happy. So, yeah, independent films, you never know what you're going to get, like the box of chocolates.
My last question for you is dealing with the 30-year gap you mentioned. What made you want to jump back into filmmaking after such a long period of time?
When I left Pittsburgh, my wife and I just had our first daughter born, but there was a lot of pollution in the city, so I gave up everything. I was working with a theater company. I'd worked with 2 theater companies, and we just gave it all up. We wanted to do the best thing for our daughter, so we just left. And so when we went to a more rural area, there weren't those filmmaking opportunities. There was theater, there was community theater, and I did some of that. But when I got back into more of a metro area like Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and even in Gettysburg, schedules were better, opportunities were more, and the roles were more appropriate. So I did one, and somebody said, hey, I saw you in this. Do you want to do that? And one thing kind of led to another.
As good things usually do. One thing leads to another. But, Jim, thank you so much for your time.
It's been a real pleasure. Thanks very much for talking to us.
My last question is, where can people follow you online? Do you have an online presence?
I have an online presence. They can find me on Facebook at jim-krut, K-R-U-T. I do have a website, Helizombie, Helizombie, helizombie.com. And there I've got photos and videos and merch and such like that, shirts, all kind of cool stuff relating to mostly Dawn of the Dead, because it's my way of paying tribute to the film too.
All right, well, you guys check out his content, buy a shirt, get an autograph, get a picture, hang it on your wall, and check out the links in the show notes below. He's going to show it off for you right now.
This is what I look like in my younger days. That's when I was going to say I had hair, but they took the top of my head off, so a lot of it was missing. Fortunately, it's grown back.
All right, well, thank you guys. Make sure that you guys hit that subscribe button below. If you guys are like me, you guys know that The Shining is one of the greatest horror movies of all time. And I'm here right now with Mr. Danny-Llyod. How are you doing today?
Good. I'm doing good. A lot of good people here.
So I want to ask just so being that we are a mental health outlet, I'll just jump right into it. I mean, this is a movie that explores mental health of isolation, mental health of parents fighting and on the verge of that. Your character also goes through a lot of mental health struggles as well. And you left acting shortly after this movie came out. Can you kind of talk about the mental health of just what a project like this does for someone as young as you?
Well, kids are very resilient. And that kind of stuff doesn't occur to them until much later. But the truth is, I didn't really leave acting. My parents and I decided to keep auditioning. So it wasn't until I was in middle school. I'm trying to think exactly what age it was. I don't remember, but so sometime before high school when I actually decided to stop trying. And so, that was a relief, frankly. So as far as how much hard work it was on The Shining, I do remember it being taxing on me as a child, but it was a lot of fun, and they went out of their way to make sure I wasn't stressed out about actually, anything that might scare me on the set. So as far as, the mental health aspect of it, I was, after The Shining, I was ready to try more. It just didn't work out too well. Yeah.
Yeah, child acting is. I hear that it's hit or miss depending on the environments you shoot in.
Yeah, as far as the on-set environment, I've heard horror stories, no pun intended, but I mean, I've heard bad things, and I, my parents wouldn't have put up with anything bad anyway, but they didn't have to worry about it. Mr. Kubrick and Leon Vitali and all the cast and crew were watching out for me really well. They would. There were specific days where I was not allowed to show up because they were doing stuff I shouldn't see, obviously. So yeah, I don't have any complaints there. And then, like you said, there's, well, I give the credit to my parents really for, not letting me get messed up, I guess.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. So if you guys haven't checked out The Shining, chances are it's currently streaming on HBO Max, along with its wonderful sequel, Dr. Sleep. Danny, thank you so much.
All right, thank you. I appreciate it.
Chances are you guys probably know the name, the Chiodo-brothers, and I am sitting here now with them. These guys are the writers, the directors of Killer-Klowns-from-outer-space, the 80s cult classic that all of you should know by now. But they have such a prolific career in also special effects as well. And I'm joined by Edward.
Edward. Hey.
Stephen.
I'm Stephen. Hey there.
And Charlie.
Hi, everybody.
Well, thank you guys so much. So I got to ask, like, the legacy of Killer Klowns, I mean, did you guys ever expect this little project to kind of have a life like this?
It's after all these years, it's wonderful to see that fans still enjoy and watch the movie. But realistically, we made a movie that we would go see, that we would like.
Yeah. And after all these years, it's just incredible that so many people have embraced the film and enjoyed it. So it really makes us smile.
Yeah, we don't know why. Actually, there was a reason why it wasn't promoted or shown. It was 6 screenings. In 6 cities, in 1988. So it wasn't promoted that way. It was the video release and MGM getting it and then doing the DVDs and all that stuff that kept it in the public eye. It was on HBO. So we're happy that after 35 years, we're starting to see the real clown love.
I gotta tell you guys, I've seen this movie a handful of times, and the cotton candy pod scene still haunts my dreams. So thank you guys for the nightmares.
Well, we tried to pull every circus motif and carnival gag we could think of and kind of turn them into what we call candy-coated kills. So there's always a malevolent, horrific ending to all those clown gags.
Yeah. We tried to keep it really straight. It was easy to make a parody movie. We didn't want to make a parody movie. We were just taking the alien invasion, classic alien invasion movie, when you're trying to explain that aliens are killing people, and we just put the spin, trying to explain to the authorities that there were clowns killing people with popcorn and cotton candy. That's the humor of it. Everything else is straight-on sci-fi movie.
The setup being that clowns in our society, in our world, they're loving, jovial, fun-loving creatures. So, the people will do anything. They'll willingly push their kids up to a clown. So we just take that little edge that, no, when you get too close to our clowns, you realize they're not normal clowns, and then it's too late. So then it's going to do diabolical things to you.
So I am a cinephile through and through. Horror is my favorite genre. But one of the things that I love about your guys' career is that this is the only movie that you guys have ever wrote and directed. So we'll make a sandwich out of this. We'll start with Killer Klowns. We'll end with Killer Klowns. But you guys have such a interesting career-wise, working on projects like Team America, Elf, Marcel the Shell was Shoes On last year. What's it like to kind of step into these different worlds and different genres?
We've been really fortunate. We've been able to work on some really spectacular projects. It's the creative that drives us. Killer Klowns is something that was our inspiration. Our first movie, our only movie to date. We haven't given up that we're going to do more. And we just been working with great directors. Matt and Trey from South Park on Team America, Jon Favreau on Elf, and our Netflix show, Alien Christmas. It's just been wonderful. We've been really lucky to be at the right place at the right time where people want to work with us.
Yeah, it's great to collaborate with great artists like Dean Fleischer-Camp with Marcel Lachelle with Shoes On. It was a different kind of movie for us, but it still embraced the kind of philosophy and storytelling that we wanted to do in our own films, just in a little different way, but just equally as successful.
Yeah, people come to us because we bring characters to life. There's something that we do. Maybe it's because we grew up in the 60s with the Looney Tunes, the Three Stooges, Abbott and Costello, Laurel and Hardy. That's part of us, the sense of humor. We grew up with the great, with Ray Harryhausen and Willis O'Brien, Mighty Joe Young, King Kong, Godzilla. We were bitten by that monster bug a long time ago, and we're just basically, it's our passion, and we're bringing it to a new and younger audience now. We're just sharing what we love.
So on the subject of Marcel the Shell with Shoes On, were you guys involved in any of like the original like shorts that made it like the phenomenon, or did you guys come in during the movie?
No, we weren't involved originally. That was Jenny Slate and Dean Fleischer-Camp. They did those YouTube shorts, and over the course of a number of years, it went from 35 million hits on it, 2 books. It's amazing that it finally went to a feature film, which goes to show you, anybody out there who wants to create content, just do it. Put it on YouTube, and I'm telling you, you could be the big winner.
Yeah, just a sensation. Then actually, we were approached in 2014 to start working on the feature.
I didn't realize that had been in production that long. So, I'm a huge South Park fan, and one of the things that I love watching is like behind the scenes of like Matt and Trey working, and it always seems like pure chaos. Is that what it was like working on Team America?
Chaos is a word. Actually, those guys, Matt and Trey, the 2 hardest working individuals I've ever worked with. They were doing South Park at night and Team America during the day. They thought making a movie with puppets would be easy, and it turned out they picked the most difficult puppet technique known to man to make that movie. So it was a grind every day, but they were there with us making that movie. It was pretty inspirational.
Yeah, Trey was pretty incredible. They were rewriting the script every night, so he was the only one that knew the dialogue. And we had created this very sophisticated pre-recorded system. You record the dialogue, and the puppets would automatically just kind of voice sync to the dialogue. But because he was rewriting it every night, we weren't able to re-record or pre-record. So he would come in, and he would actually operate all of the controllers, all the radio controllers on all the characters, delivering the lines, because he was the only one that knew the dialogue. It was brilliant.
And those guys, it was really funny. We had the most talented puppeteers, contributing to this thing, and they didn't want anybody improvising and stuff. All the funny had to come from them, and we would still be shooting it now if we had to make the puppets move perfectly and sync. 'Cause 3 or 4 puppets from 14 feet trying to walk down a narrow hallway. It's a pendulum thing where they swing and they bump into each other. So you had to take another take and another take. The fact that we could do stuff, and as long as it made them laugh, it was in the film. Otherwise, we'd still be shooting.
Yeah, that was it. They didn't really want the high-key realism in the performance. They wanted the puppets to act like puppets, and that was where the humor was.
Yeah, we did a fight scene. We choreographed fight scenes where they're throwing punches like this. Marionettes can only go like this with the strings, so we put rods behind them so they could throw punches, roll, do flips and stuff like that. They go, no, that's really good. We just want the puppets to do what puppets do, which is why the fights were so funny.
Yeah, I mean, their only criteria was to make each other laugh. If Trey directed something and Matt laughed, that made it in the movie. It was a phenomenal experience.
Well, like I said, you guys have also Elf, Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Like you guys, I mean, there's so many things to you guys. So before we jump back into Killer Clowns, are you guys working on anything now that you can talk about?
That we can talk about? No.
No, we have some cool projects. Actually, some stop-motion projects that we have in the works that we're pitching. And the fact that stop motion has been experiencing this revival, it just puts us into a good spot.
Yeah, another revival.
Yeah, the one thing we can talk about, we're going to be doing Thunderman's reunion movie in a couple of weeks. It's a television show we did for Nickelodeon with Dr. Colosso, character we created and performed.
And we're really excited about the Killer Clown video game that's coming out.
Did you guys ever think that 35 years later you guys would have a video game come out?
We didn't know what video games were except in 1988.
No, actually, when we made the film, right after we made the film, we pitched TV shows and sequels, and we thought it would make a great game. And actually, it's kind of good that it's waited this long, because the game back in the 80s would not be what they're creating now. And what they're doing right now is really kick-ass. It's really great CG stuff. The clowns look really great. We were so happy. We worked as executive producers and consultants to make sure that it looked like our film.
They drop you into 1988 Crescent Cove, the town of the movie in that era. It's just really great. It's like walking through the town, and all the locations in the movie or in the game.
What's interesting about it is you're actually in the environment and you're being stalked by clowns. And it's very frightening when you see the clowns coming to it. You're actually in the situations. You have to run away from these clowns or they get you. They cocoon you, they popcorn you. And the fun thing is, for everybody who wants to, you can actually kill clowns, or you can be a clown and kill and kill humans.
So I get killed no matter who I play, so in the game.
So this is my last question. Obviously, there have been several interviews that have come out. You guys have tried to make a sequel to the film. They've done a sequel series. There was a sci-fi series in the pipeline at one point. I gotta ask, what is stopping you guys from shopping this to somewhere like Shudder, Screambox, or taking it to smaller horror based?
We don't own it. We don't own the property.
Yeah, MGM owns the property, right? They control it. But quite frankly, we don't want to do a $2 million movie. We have ideas to do something bigger. Our goal is to do maybe an 8-episode miniseries for streaming, Netflix or somebody.
Yeah, I mean, it's complicated. Actually, the sci-fi thing was very close to happening, but I think MGM, to their credit, had a change of heart. And now with all the licensing going on, all the merchandising, the video game, I think it's just enhancing the property to a point where, if the game does well, it'll show that it is a mainstream, popular product, and we can get something of merit off the ground instead of just a low-budget $2 million quick cash in on it that could damage the property. Now we want to be in a position where, with success of the game, to really push it into a multiple sequel movie or a multi-part television show. That's the one that excites us the most, I think.
Yeah, it's not for lack of trying that the sequel isn't there. We pitched things over the last 30 years. We've been pitching ideas. It takes one guy across the table who says, I loved this thing when I was a kid. Let's do it.
Well, that's what we're finding out now. A lot of people that loved it in the 80s and the 90s, now they're executives. Now they're working in the industry with power positions. And I think it just bodes really well for us that something will happen. I really feel confident we're going to do something.
The management group at MGM are really, really smart. They're really they love the property. So we're hoping good things are going to happen in the next year or so. Yeah.
Well, I feel like right now it's kind of primed because you guys have had the Universal Hollywood Horror Nights a few years ago. You guys have the video game coming out now, and there's also all the Spirit Halloween merchandise that you guys have done over the years. There's so many killer clowns cosplays here at the convention, so it is primed for a comeback.
Yeah, I think it shows that there's an audience out there for this property, and it's only going to feed interest in funding something.
Yeah, it's all validation,
and
the basic product.
And we have 35 years of clown ideas just waiting to launch and get give to the public.
It'll be great.
We just gotta crack open those pink cocoons of cotton candy ideas, and we're here for you guys. Thank you guys so much. I've been Captain Nostalgia. These are the Chiodo-brothers. Make sure that you guys check out Killer Clowns from Outer Space if you've lived under a rock for the last 35 years. It's a great movie, and it's going to be an awesome video game. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.